Hey guys, it's Miss Summer with an Art Extra. Hope you all enjoyed the bird's nest from last week. If any of you all made those, I would love to see pictures of them. As always, these are just extra projects for your fun, something you could do at home in your extra time if you would like. This week I picked out a reflective watercolor piece. I picked it out because, for one, I love sunsets and I think everyone does. This project is super easy and it's at what looks to be a lake or pond or river. For this project, you only need a few things. You need a nice thick piece of paper, perhaps the thickest paper that you have. Of course, I have watercolor paper because I like it. It holds water well. Then you need some paintbrushes, a flat paintbrush, a couple round paintbrushes, and I picked a couple really small paintbrushes for some details. Some simple watercolor paints. I just used the Crayola kind because that's what I had at my house. Maybe you brought back some with your school supplies. Maybe you have one that was in your school box. Just a simple Crayola watercolor palette. And also some black acrylic paint is all I used. The other paint I used, and then some chalks. That's it. Just paper, paintbrushes, watercolor paint, acrylic paint, and chalks. That's it. First step that we want to do is to find a reference photo that we really like of a sunset and a body of water and some type of bank landmass that's silhouetted against the bright sunset. We're going to make our landmass out of black acrylic paint, and that's going to create a really nice contrast with our bright sky. So find a reference photo. Mine was of a lake, and we're going to use that as a map for where we're going to put our colors in our picture. Now, the first step you want to do is to take your watercolor paper and fold it in half. And this is just a good guide for us since we're just getting started painting for where our horizon line is going to be. We've talked about a horizon line in art class before. It's that place where the sky and earth or sky and water meet, the horizon line. So that little folded area is going to be a guide as to the separation between our sky and our water here. Now, when I painted my watercolor sky, I used a flat brush and I put some water down on the paper first, kind of do a wet on wet technique. And then I looked at my reference photo and I just painted colors in blocks. They kind of ran together that I saw in my picture. I did not mix up the colors. If you're not used to doing watercolor and we're using these the type of paints we're using, we don't want to overmix because then they're going to look muddy. That's not what we want. We kind of want the watercolors to flow like they're supposed to. So use your reference photo and just lightly paint on the colors that match your reference photo. For my water, I used a round brush. I use this because that will help me get a little bit more movement in my brush strokes. They're going to look very similar because I'm using watercolor paint, but I made shorter, choppier brush strokes with this round brush. Still followed my reference guide for where my color needed to be. Now, after I finished doing my watercolor sky and water, I set my painting aside because it has to be dry to move on to our next step. So just move that out of the way, go do something else, and come back in a couple hours and you'll have your dry sky and water. Now this gets fun. This is where this project is super fun and it's really easy. We want to use our chalk and we're going to add some really pretty movement into our sky, and we're also going to brighten up the sky some because it's a little flat looking. So, and I've already done that in my picture here. I picked out some of the colors I saw in my sky, found chalk that matched it, and I just made kind of curving lines across those areas. I didn't rub my chalk back and forth. I just, on the side, used little lines to just lightly go over certain areas and add more color into those areas. And after I did that, I took my finger and I just blended it a little bit, not over blend, but I also didn't go up and down with my finger. I just went across the line that I had made. These little wisps that I've made with the chalk. just going over and blending it in. And as you can see, I've done that already here. Just brightened it up. I'm only going to do that for my sky. I'm not going to do that for the water. So after I do that, here's the fun part. I'm going to make my riverbank or the bank of my lake or pond. It's super simple. If you're worried about using a paintbrush to begin this, you could always sketch out the area that you want to paint black for your land by using a black oil pastel or black crayon. Either one will do. Just want to make sure that you very lightly sketch it if you choose to do that. I just painted mine on there. You could do that. You could directly draw out with a paintbrush where you want your bank to be. So the first thing we're going to do is to sketch out where the bottom of our land is going to be. And once your watercolor is dry, you can just kind of refold it to see where that horizon line is, that edge is halfway down the paper. That's where the bottom of our land is going to be. So I'm going to take my oil pastel and just lightly go over that line. Okay. And then I'm going to take my oil pastel and draw just like a curving, just basic line. Of course, looking at my reference photo to see where the tops of my trees are. Now, I definitely want to pick out a picture that shows a lot of my sky. Think about that when you're making your trees. You don't want your trees to go too far up your sky where we don't see any of the pretty watercolor sunset that you made. A cool fact, and I already knew this, but I was reminded of this that I learned during this, is that the sunset is usually the brightest at twilight after the sun has already gone down. So in a picture like this where the sky is super bright, you don't need to draw a sun anywhere. I know lots of times we like to put a sun somewhere it looks happy, but usually in a really bright sunset, you can no longer see the sun anymore. Now that we have these two lines as our guide for the tops of our trees and the bottom of our bank, we're going to fill that all in with black, this black acrylic paint. And I'm just going to pick up some of it and apply it to the middle. Just fill it in. Don't worry about it being exact. I'm just going to fill it in. You can see in my example that I did that across the whole top part. I filled it all in. I've got my riverbank. So now, I would love to show you all of that, but I don't want to run out of time. So now after I've done that, I'm going to create that great texture that you have of where like the treetops, you can see them silhouetted in the sunset, and the leaves of the trees. And I can do that simply by adding some little bumps at the end of my paint, with my paintbrush at the tops of this area. Maybe I can see just like the tops of the trees, just creating some of that nice foliage. I'm just I'm making, you know, here and there. I want it to look natural. And that's why I got this little brush. I was going to take this little brush, dip it in my black paint, and kind of drag it on the top. So it looks kind of like the tops of some of the trees around here, you know. And I did that right here. And then I went back, kind of did some of the leaves of those trees. And I continued that all the way across my riverbank. It was really fun. Super fun to do that. Now, so as you can see, I've started that process here. I haven't finished it. When you get to your reflection, we're going to practice something a little bit different for this paint, for the brush strokes for this part of the painting. You want to look at your reference photo so that you can see where your reflection kind of starts. And you want to take your brush and just draw. Don't get a lot of paint on your brush because this is a dry brush technique. You don't want a whole lot of paint on it, just a little bit. You want it to mostly be dry. And we want to just draw where this reflection, kind of the outline of the reflection is, and It doesn't need to be a solid line. I'm just kind of drawing the outline of this reflection. And when I look at my reference photo, then I'm going to quickly move across my paper with just flat brush strokes of the areas that are reflected in my picture. And I'm not going to go over them much. I'm just going to move quickly across, looking at my reference photo, making little brush strokes. They're kind of scratchy looking because it's a dry brush stroke technique. And the areas, as you can see right here, the trees are taller, my reflection is going to go down farther. And it's going to come up some where the trees dip back down and are closer to the earth. So I'm going to fill in all of those, again, not putting too much paint on my brush. And then I'm going to go back to the top. This kind of softens it a little bit and makes the farther up part, this part of the lake, look like it has some motion and movement going on. I'm just going to add a few little reflective areas there that go above this line that I created as my guideline. Not many, and I'm just going to continue to fill in this reflection according to my reference photo. And there you have it. It's as easy as that to make a beautiful sunset reflection at the lake. I hope you enjoyed this, and I would love to see some of your pictures that you did. You can always email them to me, text me, or you could always upload them to the Google Classroom. Remember, this is totally just for fun, and I hope you have a lot of fun doing it. Thank you, guys.